In the ancient world, there lived a queen named Cleopatra. She was a woman of great beauty, intelligence, and power, and she ruled over the kingdom of Egypt with a firm hand. Cleopatra was known for her strategic mind, her political savvy, and her ability to inspire loyalty in those around her. One day, Cleopatra met a powerful Roman general named Mark Antony. Antony was a man of great ambition and charisma, and he was immediately taken with Cleopatra's intelligence and beauty. The two of them quickly fell in love, and they embarked on a passionate and tumultuous relationship that would have far-reaching consequences. Together, Cleopatra and Mark Antony waged war against their enemies, both at home and abroad. They were determined to rule the world together, and they were willing to do whatever it took to achieve their goals. But their love was not to last. In the end, their enemies proved too strong, and Cleopatra and Mark Antony were forced to flee for their lives. They retreated to a secret hideaway, where they hoped to escape their enemies and live out the rest of their days in peace. However, their enemies were not so easily defeated. One day, a messenger arrived with news that their enemies were closing in. Cleopatra and Mark Antony knew that they had no choice but to face their fate head-on. On a dark and stormy night, they made their final stand. They fought bravely against their enemies, but in the end, they were overpowered. As they lay dying, they clung to each other, whispering words of love and comfort. And then, in a final act of defiance, Cleopatra and Mark Antony decided they must take their own lives. Cleopatra, according to legend, was bitten by a venomous snake, while Mark Antony chose to fall on his own sword. Their deaths were a tragedy, but their love had been a great one and it had changed the course of history forever. Cleopatra and Mark Antony, two of history's most famous lovers, are said to have died by their own hands. But could their deaths have been the result of foul play? For centuries, scholars and historians have debated the circumstances surrounding their suicides. Some have argued that they were driven to take their own lives out of love, while others have suggested that they were forced into it by political circumstances. But what if there is more to the story? What if Cleopatra and Mark Antony were not the victims of their own tragic love, but of a sinister plot? In this video, we will delve into the mystery surrounding the deaths of Cleopatra and Mark Antony and explore the possibility that they were not suicides, but murders. Cleopatra was born in 69 BC in Alexandria, Egypt, to Ptolemy XII Auletes and Cleopatra V Tryphena. She ascended to the throne of Egypt at the age of 18, ruling alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. However, tensions between the two siblings soon led to a civil war, which Cleopatra eventually won with the help of Julius Caesar, a powerful Roman politician and general. Cleopatra and Caesar became lovers, and she bore him a son named Caesarion. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, Cleopatra aligned herself with Mark Antony, a Roman general who was a member of the Second Triumvirate, a political alliance that ruled Rome after Caesar's death. Mark Antony and Cleopatra became romantically involved, and she bore him 3 children. They participated in a number of military campaigns together, but their relationship was not well received by the Roman public or the ruling class. In 31 BC, Mark Antony's forces were defeated by Octavian, also known as Caesar Augustus, his rival and the future first Roman emperor. After their defeat, Cleopatra and Mark Antony fled to Egypt, where they attempted to build a new army to resist Octavian's forces. However, they were ultimately besieged in Alexandria. According to historical accounts, Cleopatra and Mark Antony both committed suicide, with Cleopatra allegedly using a poisonous snake to end her life. The exact details of their deaths have been the subject of debate and speculation for centuries. While many historians believe that Cleopatra and Mark Antony died by their own hands, there are some who have suggested that their deaths were not self-inflicted, but the result of foul play. This theory suggests that Cleopatra and Mark Antony were murdered, and that their suicides were staged to cover up the true cause of their deaths. There are several reasons why some scholars and historians have questioned the official story. First, the circumstances surrounding their deaths are somewhat unclear. While some accounts suggest that Cleopatra died from the bite of a snake, others claim that she used poison or some other method to end her life. Similarly, there is some debate over how Mark Antony died. Some sources suggest that he stabbed himself with his own sword, while others claim that he was already dead when Cleopatra died. Additionally, some historians have pointed out that the idea of Cleopatra and Mark Antony committing suicide together seems somewhat improbable. Both were powerful, intelligent leaders who had survived many challenges and setbacks throughout their lives. It seems unlikely that they would both give up so easily, especially given that they had children to protect and a kingdom to defend. Finally, there are some historical accounts that suggest that Octavian, the man who defeated them, may have had a motive to kill them. Cleopatra and Mark Antony were major political and military figures, and their defeat at the hands of Octavian would have secured his position as ruler of Rome. Some have suggested that he may have wanted to eliminate his rivals once and for all, and that he used their apparent suicides as a cover for his own crimes. One of the main pieces of evidence that supports the theory that Cleopatra and Mark Antony were murdered is the fact that their deaths occurred at a particularly convenient time for Octavian. The defeat of Cleopatra and Mark Antony effectively ended the civil war that had been raging in Rome, and allowed Octavian to become the undisputed ruler of the Roman Empire. It is possible that Octavian saw Cleopatra and Mark Antony as a threat to his power, and that he decided to eliminate them in order to solidify his position as emperor. Another piece of evidence that supports the murder theory is the fact that the details surrounding their deaths are somewhat unclear. For example, it is not entirely clear how Cleopatra managed to obtain the snake that allegedly killed her. Some historians have suggested that it may have been brought to her by one of Octavian's soldiers, who convinced her to use it as a way of ending her life. Similarly, there are conflicting reports about how Mark Antony died, and it is not clear whether he was already dead when Cleopatra died. Finally, some historians have pointed to the fact that the story of Cleopatra and Mark Antony's suicide seems almost too perfect. It is unlikely that two such powerful leaders would simply give up and die in such a dramatic way. It is possible that the story was concocted to cover up the fact that they were murdered, and that their apparent suicides were staged to make it look like they had acted out of love and despair. So, who could have been responsible for the murder of Cleopatra and Mark Antony? There are several possibilities. Octavian is the most obvious suspect, given his motive and opportunity. However, there are other potential culprits as well. For example, it is possible that one of Cleopatra's own servants, or one of Mark Antony's soldiers, could have been bribed to carry out the murders. Alternatively, it is possible that someone else entirely was responsible, and that they simply used the chaos and confusion of the moment to carry out their plan. As we explore these questions, we come across several intriguing clues and theories that leave us with even more questions. For example, some historians have suggested that there may have been a third person present in the room where Cleopatra and Mark Antony died. This theory is based on the fact that some accounts suggest that Cleopatra's servant was able to get into the room where she and Mark Antony were holed up, despite the fact that the room was supposedly heavily guarded. If this is true, then it is possible that the servant may have witnessed something that could help us understand what really happened in the moments before their deaths. Another intriguing clue is the fact that Cleopatra supposedly left behind a written account of her life, which is now lost to history. This document, if it existed, could provide valuable insights into her thoughts, feelings, and motivations, and could help us understand why she may have chosen to end her life. Cleopatra's tomb has never been found, and historians speculate it may contain clues that could help us understand what really happened in the final days of her life. Similarly, there are reports that Mark Antony's body may have been buried in a secret location, and that it too may contain clues that could help us solve the mystery. As we continue to investigate the mystery of Cleopatra and Mark Antony's deaths, we are left with many more questions than answers. But one thing is clear: the story of their lives and deaths is a fascinating one, full of intrigue, passion, and drama, and the more we learn, the more we want to know. Stay tuned for more on Cleopatra in future videos, and thank you for watching Conceptual Learnings uncovering the mystery of Cleopatra and Mark Antony's tragic demise. Be sure to like and subscribe for more.